Okay, so this is question one about forms and conventions. Now you've done some bits and you've kind of compared it to a couple of real thriller films. What I'd like you to do is I'd also like you to talk about how you followed the conventions of establishing character, how you established location. So remember that work that you did, which is down here. Let's see. Um, da, 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 da. Down here, if we look, what have I learned from my title sequence research? You could use this to help you, but it's the one where this task, when you did what do directors seek to establish? Yeah, remember this work that you did? You can use that. Yeah, from what you learned. Remember, you did an analysis of three different sequences about what directors seek to establish. So what you could do is talk about what you sought to establish and how your opening sequence follows the conventions of a structure of an opening sequence. Okay. Okay, so I'm on this question, and I think this is, let's have a look. I think it's question two. Okay, so this question where you put here teenager girls, can you change that to teenage girls? I thought it would be easier. Take off this thing about it being easier and take this thing about the fact that you're teenage girls. Talk about the fact that the contrast between the representation of the middle-aged man and the stereotypical vulnerable teenage girl is what you wanted to include. Think about that. Remember, this is a family man, and you've reinforced the idea that middle-aged, that men are kind of usually the protagonists and women are weak. But the whole thing for you is that the contrast between the teenage girl and the middle-aged man is what you need to be talking about. So take off this thing about it be easier. Try to make it fairly realistic. We try to stick with certain particular social groups as well. Yeah, you kind of said, so you talked about the social groups, but I think with this thing, it will definitely be a good idea for you to talk about how you've focused on the contrast between the vulnerable girl and the kind of the sinister man. Also, you can talk about the idea that middle-aged white men tend to be represented as in the media. Stereotypically, they are seen as like people that stalk or have a kind of fetish for young girls, like paedophiles almost. Although the girl is not a child, but this whole thing of this young girl, this focus on young girls, reinforces the idea that we see in the media. It would be good for you to even have some newspaper cuttings of middle-aged white men and their links with young girls, showing them as presenting them as quite villainous. So not only in thriller films, but also in the media in general, the idea that middle-aged white men are sinister in some way. But this is a very strong response. Okay, you need a lot more detail with this question. Yeah, it's not as strong as your previous question. You talked about independent institutions, which is a good thing. You know it's not going to be a major institution. And then you mentioned Warp Films here, you mentioned Vertigo Films here. I want to know what other films they have produced. Yeah, they produced British films, have they produced thrillers, have they distributed thrillers? What else have they produced that would kind of be that you could see some similarities with your own film? Another thing I want you to talk about as well is how would you promote your film? What types of institution might promote your film? So magazines, what magazines would it be in? Would it be in Empire or would it be in a fanzine? Yeah. So don't just talk about the company, the independent film companies, also talk about places where you would promote, the types of companies that would promote your film. Now, I think this question lacks detail, Katie, and I think you know that. And I definitely think that talking about your film companies that you've chosen, but what about the name of your film company at the start of your film? I think you called it, was it Rockstar or something beginning with an R? Talk about why you chose that name for your film company. What type of film company, even though it's a made up film company, what type of film that film company would distribute? What types of films? How would they go about promoting their films? But you need a lot more work on this question. Another thing I've noticed with each of your questions, the ones I've looked at already, one and two, and three, is there's no images. I think you did some images in question one, but that's it. Remember, this has to be presented in a creative way. Yeah? Let's have some images in here. Let's have some videos, some trailers. With that previous question, with question, I think it was question three, with this question, why not have some trailers of films that Warp Films have distributed or shown? Have we need a bit more, it needs to be a bit more interactive because at the moment, this is like, we're kind of are hanging around the level 2 because it's not being really creative. So a lot more creativity, please, Katie. I like the way you've broken down this question and different types of people that will be interested in your film, which is good. What you should do is have some images of the types of people that would be interested in your film and why they'll be interested in. I think 16 to 45 is a bit too much of an age gap. Also, original age range was started at 12. Yeah, but 12 to what? You just said started at 12, or where did it end? Okay. So I like this. It's really good, but just some more, bit more images, a little bit more creative. That would be better. Okay. You haven't really followed the instructions for this question. Whilst you talk about how you would attract your audience, there's no mention of audience surveys. This is a low-level response. You need to have some mention of audience surveys and how you use your audience surveys and audience feedback to develop your idea, okay? So a lot more work on audience surveys in here. Who did you talk to? Those videos that we did when you fed back your idea. Who did you speak to? How did it help to improve your idea? And what did you include that helped you? You need to show your opening sequence to a group of people and get them to respond to it with questions, okay? Spell this properly. So from as opposed to form. So here you've listed the technology that you used, but you didn't tell me how you used it. Break down each one, unless, of course, you did it in the next slide. Oh, yeah, you did. Okay, I'll take it back. Okay, so you went through kind of Blogger, you looked at SurveyMonkey and so on and so forth. Make sure you go through each piece of technology that you mentioned in the first slide. Now, here, whoops-a-daisy. Here you mentioned Premiere. It's Adobe Premiere Pro. That's the name of the piece of technology. So change this. Actions that we used in order to create our title sequence. This is where we imported all the footage, blah, 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 blah. However, I decided to create another version of the title sequence, which was fairly similar to our original idea, but instead we black screen. Why don't you show the difference? Why don't you show the difference between the first one you did and the previous one you did? Yeah. So you talked about you did a different sequence. Show me the difference between them and how you developed your skills in Premiere by adding all the titles, by putting the music down. You've got lots that you can say about Premiere, so you need to show me what you're talking about with images or with video footage. So there's more work to do for this question, Katie. Daisy, which is, just so you know, this is the one about technologies, okay? So there's more work to do for this question. What I need you to do is question 6. I need more work on Adobe Premiere. I would like more work on how you use sound, on how you use the editing system, how you blended things, how you use transitions, all of that stuff for this question. You can really get some good marks with this question. So here you talk about, so you had to research, we learned from our preliminary task that the type of shot we use can affect the overall quality impression which you get from watching the film, or in this case, from watching our title sequence. Also, why, you say while, or whilst using the camera, we realised that the camera angles, rather than angels, we used had a huge impact on how well each shot turned out. The camera shots were improved a lot from the start to the beginning, which allowed us... What does this mean, from the start to the beginning? Do you mean from the beginning of you making a sequence, or the beginning when you did your preliminary task? What does that mean? So you describe how you use sound here, but not how you've improved. From your preliminary task, you didn't use any sound, did you? Apart from just the talking. There was no music, there was no matching the sound to the picture. There was nothing like that. So talk about what happened with your preliminary task and how you improved in terms of your knowledge of sound. Same. Okay, just be careful with your writing here, your spelling. So you've got this spelling mistake here, you've got this spelling mistake here. Just do those corrections for me. Now, I like this thing about the fact that the editing we first used was very basic, basic cropping of clips to make sure they connect correctly to the following clip. However, when we reached so rather than that, say, so a basic cutting of clips rather than cropping, make sure that they connect correctly to the following clip. We'll make sure that it was continuous. Yeah, continuity editing you used here, but very basic continuity editing. So show me the difference. Show me the timeline of your opening sequence. Show me how many different timelines you used, and then explain that in your preliminary task you only used one line. Whereas in your opening sequence or your title sequence, you used like about 3. You had the titles, you had the footage, and you had the music. So you need a little bit more detail for these two on how you've improved. You've mentioned it briefly here, but not at all here. Good. And explain that over you filmed your title sequence over like quite a while actually. It wasn't like all in the same day. You filmed it like you had about 3 or 4 different filming sessions, and everything had to be the same. The lead character had to be wearing the same clothes. The girl had to be wearing had the same bag, the same jacket, looking back. So she had to have the same hairstyle. So talk about the fact of how you looked at mise en scène, and show me some images from your preliminary task, show me some images from your title sequence, and show me the difference between your consideration of clothing. What about your consideration of setting? In your preliminary task, there was no real consideration of setting. You just did it in a random room, didn't you? Whereas in your title sequence, you focused on setting, you focused on the props, the taking of the ring, putting it on the table, the lighting. So it wasn't just clothing, it was lighting, it was setting it in a house, setting it on a street, thinking about using the iPad, the tablet. All of those things you did, which showed your consideration of mise en scène and how you've improved from your preliminary task. Much more work on this with mise en scène. You can get a lot more marks. So well done, Katie, for addressing all 7 questions. At the moment, you're at high level 2, low level. I think actually a low level 3, which is like the CB type bracket. You can definitely do much better. It needs to be more creative. It needs to be more interactive. I need to see much more images and videos on this in your evaluation questions. Put your opening sequence in your evaluation. Show it. Maybe point to it. Stop it at key points and point to what you're talking about. Have images from your title sequence for some of the different questions. But overall, a good first attempt. But can you improve, please?